compared to the previous ones, today's panel is a little bit different. It's a bit focused on US neurosurgical training and residents and students. I apologize ahead of time if you think this is a bit narrow, but I think it makes sense to look at it today. The landscape of neurosurgical training, I think, is changing. There's some things that have come up within global neurosurgery in terms of how students and applicants are looking at it, as far as what kind of experience they can get from training programs. And also from the other side is, from an applicant pool, how does someone with global neurosurgery experience fare compared to others in terms of, they're being competitive. So today we have 4 amazing panelists, Dr. Yang, Dr. Chambliss, Dr. Naheed, and Dr. Haglund. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And this panel is going to be moderated by Hodan and Eddie, 2 of our researchers at the Program in Global Surgery and Social Change Global Neurosurgery team. This will be their last event they're involved with. I'm kind of sad to see them go, but you 2 have been amazing this year. So thank you for everything you've done. Let me turn it over to both of you, Eddie and Hodan, and over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Hodan Abdi. I'm a medical student, rising 4th year, and I'm currently working with Dr. Park. So first, I wanted to start the definition of global neurosurgery. Global neurosurgery is the clinical and the public health practice of neurosurgery with the primary goal of ensuring timely, safe, and affordable neurosurgical care to all those who need it. So before we start, next slide, please. We wanted to kind of give a quick summary of the survey that was done by Dr. Lola. He's a MGH neurosurgery resident. So in this survey, they were looking at the current state of global neurosurgery education in US residencies. So on the results, they found out, first of all, the response rate was low. 34 of the residency programs completed the survey, and 22 out of the 34 respondents, they reported that offering funding for research and educational opportunities in global neurosurgery to their residents. And overall, the survey, most of the programs who completed the survey, they had low engagement in global neurosurgery work. So next slide, please. So the main goal of today's session is to kind of, we invited 4 programs throughout the US, and we want to have open discussion, kind of asking the programs and the faculty their efforts or some of the opportunities that's available to medical students and residents. And also to give a platform for medical students and residents to ask questions regarding global neurosurgery and what it is and how they can get involved. So thank you all for joining us today. It is going to introduce our first panelist.
So for our first speaker, we actually have Dr. Lola Chambliss from Vanderbilt. She is an associate professor of neurosurgery and the residency program director. So I just want to hand the platform off to her so she can speak.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to participate today. I'm delighted to be able to talk a little bit about what our program does and learn from some other real leaders in this space. So just to give a little brief introduction of how we think about global neurosurgery at Vanderbilt. Our residency program in general is designed around the philosophy that there's the ability within 7 years to train someone to be a good clinical neurosurgeon, but also to train them in a way that is personalized to what their eventual career goals are. And so that may be enfolded into vascular training, or that may be, NIH funded science, but that can also be global neurosurgery. Right. So what we really try to do is not have kind of a cookie cutter approach to residency, but to really try to enhance the strengths and interests of our residents after they get their initial junior resident years behind them. And so my colleagues, Chris Bonfield and Michael Dewan, run our global neurosurgery program. Chris is the clinical director of that, and Michael is the academic director of that. they both have extensive experience in global neurosurgery, both from a clinical boots on the ground standpoint and from an academic research standpoint. And they offer kind of different but similar perspectives. And so what our residents really have the option of doing is kind of two things. Any resident that is interested in just having at least some exposure to global neurosurgery can participate in a trip with faculty. And so all residents are invited and encouraged to do that at some point during their training and to attend a trip with one of our international partners when faculty are going. And that happens 6 or so times a year. So we try to make that opportunity available and funded for everyone. And in some cases, that's going to be something of a one-off, but in other cases that might really stimulate someone's interest and might really change the direction of their career. And we've seen that happen too. For those that are more focused on global neurosurgery and really want to have that be an important part of their actual specialization, we offer up to 2 years of elective time that can really be focused on that. And so what that can look like often is a longer commitment to a given site, an international site that can be up to a year long, that often is both a clinical and research experience funded through a variety of different fellowship programs, as well as then in that second elective year, a lot of academic time that may be led out of Nashville, where they're doing interesting projects that are in concert with our international partners, and they may be flying to neurosurgical meetings or to meet with research mentors in other locations as well. Typically, they can do those years during either their 4th and 5th year of residency or their 4th and 7th. And so we have some flexibility there within the program that allows people to kind of see where their funding is going to come in and how to make that fit with their interests. And so we've had several residents that have very successfully obtained year-long fellowship funding to do major projects at different locations. And one of them, Michael Dewan, now runs that program for us after completing the Paul Farmer Fellowship. And so, what I have seen in my tenure there is just that, global neurosurgery has gone from being, not really a factor at Vanderbilt to probably one of the things that draws students to us more than almost anything else. And I think that, I credit that with, I credit Chris Bonfield really with bringing that to Nashville and to Vanderbilt. And I'm here on the panel today as a little bit of an outsider, I think, in that this hasn't been a major focus of my own career, but it's something that I think is really important. And one of the key things about being a program director is to kind of recognize all the various aspects of training that may be important to your trainees and to help build partnerships that allow them to get that training. And so that's what I've tried to do. And I can take further questions about that when we get to that point.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Chambliss. That was a great overview. Next, we're going to have Dr. Isaac Yang from UCLA. He is also an associate professor of neurosurgery, and he is the PI of the brain tumor program at UCLA. So without further ado, I'll have Dr. Yang speak.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the introduction, Eddie, and Dr. Park, Dr. Chambliss, Dr. Naheed, Dr. Haglund. Just an honor to join you on the panel. And I actually, like Dr. Chambliss, don't have a lot of personal experience in global neurosurgery, so I'm speaking a little bit outside my expertise, but I'm proud to represent UCLA. And there are many PIs in the brain tumor program here, so it sounds like I'm the only one that was, just want to make sure and very clear that I'm not the only one. That was just too kind of you for sure, Eddie. I agree with Dr. Chambliss is that I think there's been a shift in the whole specialty as more young people join neurosurgery. I think maybe, and Dr. Park will have to attest to this, maybe 20 years ago, I think there wasn't as much interest. Maybe Dr. Dempsey, maybe Fines. I know in my special, when Dr. Chambliss said cookie cutter residency, I thought about my residency. That might be the definition of cookie. I think the C at UCSF stands for cookie, because we didn't fix anything. Actually, and this is a true story. I just wanted to share a true story. One of my co-residents, a year below me, quit residency during his PGY 3 year, and we were such a cookie residency, we didn't even shift rotations. Like the whole machine does not compute, and it didn't, instead of giving people like time off or support, everyone just worked harder, and we literally didn't even rotate rotations. But I think what's happened over the past 20 years, especially as culture changes and more young people are entering neurosurgery is that people are entering neurosurgery for different reasons, for different purposes, not just to do X, Y, or Z, but to think about the impact that you could have. I think in 2022, if you say, look, just work as hard as you can and make more money, I think a good subset of people will actually say, I'm going to work a little less harder and make less money for other reasons, whatever they may be. And so I think the culture has changed. And I think one of the things that has changed that's been very evident, as Dr. Chambliss just mentioned, this is not just a fad or a trend. This is a movement that has grown and grown and is now an established movement, which is how can you have an impact as the United States, the richest country in the world, the sole global power left. Do we have a responsibility to help and to broaden our horizons? It's kind of like with the COVID vaccines, right? We have them, and then do you hoard them in just the countries that can afford them? Because neurosurgery is kind of like that. Neurosurgery is a luxury, and we are very fortunate in, like, I'm in Los Angeles, right? We have so many neurosurgeons in 5 level 1 trauma centers, and any given night you may have like 100 or 200 neurosurgeons in the city, and that's just crazy when you think we are the second biggest city to New York and really have 7 or 8 million people. So that kind of luxury, should it be concentrated and should that be distributed? And then looking at global neurosurgery, so many people have looked at it, like Dr. Park. Here at UCLA, it's Jorge Lazareff, Aria Fala, Juan Kim, my colleagues. They've gone on missions to Guatemala, to Haiti. And when they go there, the subset's different. Like I'm here looking at skull-based surgery, acoustic neuromas, and far laterals. When they transition that practice there, they're looking at traumatic brain injury, subdural hematomas. How do you treat patients without, a CT scanner, but maybe with an ultrasound? And then looking at shunt, hydrocephalus, so that population is very different. The skill set necessary is very different when you transition into a more international or global neurosurgical population. And so it's been amazing to watch. And I think I really have to give a lot of credit to Key Park here, because I think he was one of the early trailblazers. And I think Dr. Dempsey, Dr. Haglund, who's on this call, Dr. Jorge Lazareff, there have been a lot of elder statesmen, flag bearers, tip of the spear that are moving, but the spear is just getting wider and wider. You can see it, with so many people on this call, the people in our residency, the people at other residencies, you're seeing that more people want to make a bigger difference. And that's not just about money or prestige or this or that, but wanting to make an impact because they want to impact humanity, society, other countries, and the world for the better, because we're so blessed here with so many luxuries that we take for granted. Can we help our fellow brothers and sisters? And I think that movement has really taken off, and it's exciting to see. The last thing is that Dr. Park did mention is that it has now taken over a lot of applicants' CVs and their efforts. One of my current students, Anjali Pradhan, she just spent 4 months in Africa doing research, and she came back and she wants to publish on that population set and look on that set. And we had the conversation: does that hurt her application chances? Does that change her? Does it change the way it's seen? And I think more and more it's making a certain type of applicant just as competitive as if you come from, the NIH, the University of NIH, with, University of NIH funding and science papers. Is that there's a different niche, and that we really are following the sphere of all of our trainees. And a lot of this is led by our younger trainees, younger students, and younger residents who are watching this voice, this movement, this real impact that neurosurgeons are having, not just here in the United States, but across the world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yang, for that opening talk and kind of highlighting the importance of giving back, and also highlighting the need for doing more with less, especially in places in Uganda or other countries who do not have all of the fancy equipment that we use. We can learn a lot from how they operate, or how they use ultrasound to diagnose, or many other things. Thank you so much. So next we have Dr. Haglund. Dr. Haglund, he's Distinguished Professor of Neurosurgery at Duke University, and he's the current Program Director at Duke University. Dr. Haglund, please welcome.
There we go. Let me get back to the beginning. Here we go. I'm going to go 5 minutes, right? Here we go. I appreciate being here. This is a really cool thing you're doing, and I think it's really needed. I think there's a lot of medical students and residents that really have a heart for this, and I think what's already been discussed is I think it's different now. It's the old Thomas Friedman, the world is flat. I do have some disclosures because I get a lot of funding from industry and things for our work in Africa. But the big thing, you know, that's very obvious is Africa, when we started in 2007, had about 586 neurosurgeons, but most of them were in the northern part of Africa or South Africa. There's only 77 neurosurgeons for all of West, Central, and East Africa. And if you look at the country we were looking at, which was Uganda, with 30 million people, 5 neurosurgeons. Morocco in the north had 171 neurosurgeons and about 1 to 187,000. Uganda had 1 to 6 million, 2 neurosurgical centers, the one at Malago, the National Referral Hospital, and then Ben Wharf's wonderful work that's been done in Mbali at the Cure Hospital. But you look at East Africa, 27 neurosurgeons for 270 million people. It was just really difficult. Now for me, my big thing about the giving back is Luke 12:48. It says, to whom much has been given, much more has been required. And my first invitation to Uganda was from a pastor of a little church of 50,000 people who invited me to come over. We had, after our first trip, saw there's only 1 neurosurgeon for 6 million. They had no technology. They had 1 ventilator in a 1,500 bed hospital, no operating room for neurosurgery, and no training program. So we came up with this kind of 3 T's in research: the technology, the twinning. We'd take large teams of 20 to 50 people. And basically we brought over neurosurgeons, but we also brought over OR nurses, ICU nurses, recovery room nurses, biomed engineers. And we were doing 1 to 2 trips a year. And then training. I was the program director at Duke at that time. And we started a training program for the Ugandan residents. And then research. That to develop a large research collaboration between Duke and Uganda to raise their research capabilities. Now, in 12 years before the pandemic, we did 20 trips to Uganda, and we brought over about $14 million worth of supplies and equipment, about 114 tons. And we had a lot of support from the university. So my point, one point would be is, I think the university is supportive of this. The chancellors, the president of the university, the director of our Global Health Institute, my department chairs, and we've had a lot of philanthropy come in too. And we looked at it a few years ago, and we'd done 529 brain and spine surgeries, and we donated almost $2.6 million a time among all our volunteers that went over. Then we started the training program. Our first 2 graduates, Alex Muhindu on the second from the left, and Oscar Obega, the one on the right. And our second cohort, I'm very, very proud of, because right next to my left is Juliet. And she's the first woman neurosurgeon in Uganda. And she also did a pediatric neurosurgery fellowship at Toronto Sick Children's Hospital. And then this year, our second woman graduate, Lydia, right there in the dead center of the Hollywood Square box, she was the best candidate in neurosurgery on the oral exams for all of East Africa. So it's working well. This is one of my favorite slides. I'm sitting at the end of the table watching Alex Mahinda take out this large sphenoid wing meningioma by himself. And I'm just sitting at the end of the table, you know, making my sarcastic comments from the end. And here's what we had in 2007 for neurosurgeons. Then David Kitcha came to Mbarara and started the program there. And the goal is over the next, 7 or 8 years to train about 50 neurosurgeons. Unfortunately, the population is going to double from 2007 to 2030 up to 62 million. But if each one of those trained a general surgeon to do simple trauma, which is 77% of the cases they see at the National Referral Hospital, looks something like this. And then we're up to 1 to 171,000 to take care of the majority of the problems they have there. So now it looks like this. It'd be 62 million. And they have 2 training centers now, one in Kampala and one in Mbarara. And we're training residents. On the research side, Tony Fuller, who's been was one of my first ever Masters in Global Science graduate students, went through that, became an expert, became our associate director of our division of global neurosurgery and neurology. And we do take students. We take undergrad students down in the lower right that do these BAS foundations. We take our residents, we do camps. So there's a big opportunity for everybody from a freshman in Duke undergrad all the way up to a chief resident to get involved in this. Right now, one of our residents, Prince Otway, he's from Nigeria. He's actually starting the Masters in Global Science program at the Duke Global Health Institute, and he wants to do global health work. And this is what our division of global neurosurgery has grown to. We have about 125 people now, working very hard on research with our collaborators in Uganda. And we've got about over 100 publications now since we started this whole thing in 2014. So the academic rigor is easy. We've got 2 NIH grants now, one for epilepsy and one for predictive modeling and trauma. So it is fundable, and it is a clear academic career. I've got more publications now in global neurosurgery than I had in my whole career leading up to sort of switching over to this in my basic science research and optical imaging and my NIH grants. So that we have a recent paper out that you know, sort of talks about our philosophy that people can look at that was in Journal of Neurosurgery. But I'll stop there so don't go too long, and hope I wasn't over 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haglund. It's really fascinating to see the work Duke's doing at Uganda, and really excited to learn more about it during this session. Next, I would like to introduce our final panelist, Dr. Naheed. He's an associate professor of neurosurgery and the current residency program director at MGH. Please welcome Dr. Naheed.
Thanks so much. Sorry, my video is not on, but I'm thrilled to be part of this panel. And just want to echo what Lola, Isaac, and Mike has said, that there is a significant interest and effort in global neurosurgery, which, as Isaac had mentioned, is really the tip of the spear from, you know, so many before us. And Key and John Muir over at Harvard have done a wonderful, wonderful job, at least locally in Boston, in championing this effort. And I have to say, from neurosurgery, every year it's awesome to see the number of people interested, from the applicant pool to our residents. We currently have at least 2 who have done significant work, both Faith Robertson and Myron Roll, and others who are very, very interested. And it's really caused us to think of this, as Lola said so eloquently, it's not yet another thing, but rather one of the hallmarks of training. And for those who are interested, or even those who are more than just interested, not only is this a great time to do it, but as Mike has shown, it's fully fundable. There's a lot of academic rigor with it, and there's a significant impact that one can have. I went as a resident to Mbarara, and for me, that was a very amazing and life-altering trip, because as Dr. Haglund mentioned, not only the impact was really amazing to see, but also it was such an incredible moment to see. Back then there was no neurosurgeon, and now there is, but general surgeons trying to pull together what they knew, and doing really well, actually. And it made you realize that you were part of a larger community that even extended beyond our neurosurgical field, but frankly, even the US. And I thought that was such a really cool moment. And so for us on the programmatic side, we are very, very interested in not only supporting, but partnering with other programs that are doing it at a very high level. And clearly the panelists on this call represent some significant work in it. And we're just happy to even be considered within this panel. So I'll stop there. I just thrilled to be part of this, and thank you for the invitation as well.
And thank you to all the panelists for those great overviews. I'm just going to spotlight everyone. But yeah, we're going to actually transition into the Q&A portion of today's session. All the audience members are invited to ask questions. You can put it in the chat. You can also unmute yourself and actually just raise your hand and ask the question, which we would actually prefer, just so it's a little bit more of a conversation. but I'll actually start off with a question for all the panelists. How do you think the residents at your program have benefited from being involved in global neurosurgical efforts? I think in global health, it's just really important not to only have educational efforts for those in the LMIC, in the low and middle income country setting, but to also learn from those exchanges. So I'm curious if any of you have any insight on that.
Sure, I can speak to that first. So I think that there's a tremendous opportunity to learn whenever you get outside your comfort zone. And after a few years of working at a single institution, you kind of know how things work. The amount that you learn when you go anywhere else is really tremendous, because it opens your eyes to the fact that there's more than one or two ways to do things. There's actually, perhaps infinite ways to do things. And it makes you realize that, makes you excited about learning again and curious, and I think innovative. And so I see that in our residents when they return from these trips, and that they've really had their eyes opened to the idea that we could be doing things differently, even here in Nashville. And they have ideas that improve treatment of our patients here. I think the ETV CPC story is maybe like the most best example of that I know, which is the idea that this is an operation that was developed in a resource limited area because shunts weren't really feasible there. And now that's an operation that's become the mainstay of treatment, for much of pediatric hydrocephalus, even in the United States. So it's incredible to think about how it's really a bi-directional growth that happens when you leave your home institution and go out and explore something different.
Yeah, I'd say that's exactly right. I totally agree. I mean, I think they open their eyes to something. They see the other side of the world where it's really difficult. We have a huge $5 million NIH grant to work on predictive modeling for brain tumors and triage. But that whole thing grew out of Tony Fuller's and Timothy Dunn's work over and some of our graduate students over in Uganda, trying to look at how do they triage somebody who comes in with a traumatic brain injury and should they get an operation or not. And we developed a huge database, and they were able to use that now. We're starting to use it at Duke for looking at traumatic brain injury. So I think there is a west-east, east-west, or north-south, south-north thing that can happen. I think the other thing is it gives them an appreciation for how fortunate they are, but there's just a lot of passion. I mean, we obviously see a lot of applicants who are very interested in global health, as do multiple people on this call. And, Brian's got one of the residents we really wanted in our program. And so it's less fun now that it's more competitive, but I think there's just a real passion among the younger generation to, not worry about a 3-car garage and how many Ferraris they have, but like go out and do something meaningful and do it early in their career, not later in their career, because they just view that as, and I hope what we do is the more senior people in this, like he's done in Boston and other places are trying to do, is make it possible so they can turn this into something that's a career, because a lot of them are told this, you can't do a career with this. This is not a career. This is a nice thing you do as a volunteer, but it's not a career. And I'd argue, well, 100 publications says something different, right? And we're having people promoted through the ranks at Duke, because of their work, in East Africa. So I think it is possible. And getting them involved early, it's kind of the pipeline thing. It's like if you get them involved and excited about this when they're a freshman in undergrad, then that's going to probably develop into something more powerful as they go along. And then they can, like our residents, one of our residents is doing his endovascular first year, and then he'll do the last year of his endovascular his 7th year. Prince is doing a master's in global science this year during his 4th year, and then we'll do some more of that, and then a CAS fellowship to go along with it. So I think it's totally possible for the residents to really take advantage of these different programs around the country. And I think the big thing we can do, and Key's obviously done it in Boston, with the Paul Farmer Fellowship, he's gotten residents from all over the country. And I think it'd be nice if we had sort of a network of places residents could go that were interested to do what they're passionate about. I mean, Key's group has perfected policy and worked on that in a way that's just amazing. And we may be a little more, on the ground type group, but I think the resident can find what they're looking for if we have a way for them to, kind of find out what's going on.
I just wanted to add to both what Mike and Lola mentioned, that everything they said I agree with, and I would even add that the amazing thing is watching our residents not only start their own careers, but be really innovative. And I think this field gives you the ability to do it, whether it's a new initiative or working collaboratively with other institutions or around the world, or one of our senior residents, Myron, has started a large global health effort in the Caribbean, and spent time with Key and John Muir at PGSEC at Harvard, doing a lot of the policy stuff and then implementing it, and doing that all in 2 years. That we couldn't be more proud. And it's like Mike said, I think it's this amazing network of folks that are willing to help everybody and work collaboratively. And I think that, to me, is not only an opportunity I would want all our residents to have access to, but frankly, I don't think it's dependent on our institution or anybody else's, but rather all of ours collectively. And I think that community of folks who want to help out, you certainly feel it in global neurosurgery.
Yeah, I was alluding to it earlier about how there's a lot of young people involved. And I think young people have always recognized change earlier than older people, whether it's rock music or cultural shifts or art. Young people recognize the change before older people do. And I think it has been recognized. And the specific question was, how do people come back? When I've seen the medical students and the residents who have come back from their international experiences, they're just much better at problem solving. And I bring the particular thing up about ultrasound and CTs because I literally saw them do it. Say, well, if there used to be a TV show called MacGyver, and probably everyone young here doesn't understand what that is, but it was a particular character who could take duct tape, a pencil, and a water bottle and create like a rocket ship or just something innovative. And for lack of a better phrase, I saw these young people come back with an ability to MacGyver the situation, whether they were more grateful for what they had or whether they saw the shortcomings and worked a way around it. But just like Dr. Chambliss said, when you are pushed to be a little uncomfortable, you learn more. I think they came back with a different kind of resolve, different kind of problem solving. And then like Dr. Haglund mentioned, is the most important point number 4 for any human being is purpose and passion. Not just the Ferrari. I don't drive a Ferrari, I drive a Honda, and I love it. It has Bluetooth. But whether it's the Ferrari or the 3-car garage, it's not that. Is what is your purpose and mission? Because one day the mortality rate of every human being on planet Earth is 100%. And so when you're gone, what kind of life and legacy do you want to leave behind? I think that becomes more important. And so when I see these young people who recognize trends, who are a little bit against the grain, right? Because they're leaning into it. And when I see them come back, they come back as MacGyvers. They come back with purpose. They come back with that kind of confidence saying, oh, I know I can fix this because I did. And then you see it. And it's really remarkable because I think it impacts them, like Dr. Haglund said, for the rest of his career. He's like, I can build a program and be an academician at Duke, because I can do this anywhere. And so doing it at Duke with all the resources is going to be much easier. And so I think that confidence is also really important.
Thank you all for all of the insights, really exciting conversations, and we have a lot of questions coming up. So next question is from Mrs. Marcus. She's a medical student at Puerto Rico, and she wanted to know what are ways that medical students can get involved in global neurosurgery work. Maybe Dr. Haglund can answer this question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the medical students do get involved. I think the part of the question was about training, in neurosurgery in the U.S. We have, the difficulty, 2 things. One, for my Ugandan residents to train at Duke, they would have to pass all their USMLEs or their foreign ones. We'd have to figure out a way to get them malpractice insurance and get a license, and it's tough. The brain drain problem's also there, right? If they come over here and train, and we've seen this, myself personally several times now. It's really hard. You come over here and train for 7 years and you learn how to, U.S. surgeon, and you really want to go back. And I think there are some that do go back and they're very well trained in a U.S. program, but there's others that get put in that situation where they could make a lot of money in an underserved area, have their family still be here that's grown up with them over the last 7 years, or you can go back to Uganda and make $10,000 a year and not have the education system and whatever you want for your kids. So it's tough. So, but I think there's a way to get people involved somehow at least in the research side, very easily. I mean, we have a weekly division of global neurosurgery meeting on Friday morning, and not during the summer, but during the year every week. And Tony Fuller runs that, and we have anywhere from 25 to 50 people on, and we have a lot of guests come and just see what we're about. And some of them jump on projects, some of them don't, but there's opportunities in that setting.
Thank you so much. So we have a couple of people who raised their hand. I'll go to Master Ahmed first.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ahmed. I'm a medical student from India, currently doing neurosurgery sub-Ice in the US. And I saw that, I saw here in my experience that so much of, OR stuff, once it's used, it's after a point is deemed no longer usable, and then it just is discarded, right? And, back in India, they would be reusing a lot of this stuff. How can a pipeline be developed, where this stuff, just be, I understand there are health hazards and security hazards with that, but some of this stuff is still functional and we need this stuff. How could we have a pipeline from US to India, and for instance, our hospital would be happy to accept some of this stuff, which I see being discarded, high level technology stuff.
Well, we've transferred a lot. Our vision is that when we go over with our teams, two of the key people we take are biomed engineers, and they work with the biomed engineers over in Uganda. So when something breaks, it doesn't get put off in the corner. They call them, and when they find the $25 part that we ship for $250 over to Uganda, so they can have it, and they have the manuals for the keeping the equipment up to date and things like that. But it is hard. I mean, you don't want everything to be giant boat anchors when they get shipped over, but we identify stuff that will survive the rigors of the, humidity and the power surges, and we don't send over fancy monitors that if, they get bumped, they quit working. We send over things that we still have 2 or 3 anesthesia machines over there from 2007 that are still working, because we brought 10 and we brought 14, but 4 of them were just used to cannibalize parts. So there's ways to do it if you're careful. The biggest problem always is drills. I mean, literally, I'm always beating on some industry rep to get more drills. If I'm using a Medtronic drill that day, I go, we really need a drill for Uganda. Do you think we could get one of those? Or we could switch to Stryker, I guess, and maybe they'll send us a drill. So we use our industry partners to help us.
Thank you so much.
So next up, we have Destiny Green, who has her hand up.
Hi, everyone, and thank you to the panel for the wonderful talk. I enjoyed it very much. My name is Destiny Green. I'm a first-year medical student at Mayo Clinic, and my interest in global surgery is more so from the sustainability standpoint. To my understanding, that's one of the largest challenges with global neurosurgery is creating something that can be sustained for a long period of time. And so I would love to hear from you experts, your perspective on what you think may be, I guess, the word wouldn't be perfect, but in your minds, what would be the most ideal approach to creating a sustainable option or program for global neurosurgery in low and middle income countries?
Well, I think Dr. Haglund probably has the most experience in that in terms of really building something that's been truly sustainable. I think, as I said, I'm sort of an outsider on this panel a little bit in terms of it not being the focus of my own career, but what I think I've seen in terms of the partnerships we built at Vanderbilt is it really is about the partnership. It is not about dropping in and taking a bunch of stuff and doing one trip and not following up. It is about building that training relationship, because if you're just coming in to do some cases and then you're leaving, I think you really lack any ability to follow up on your successes and failures and learn from what's actually going to give long-term good results there. I don't know, Dr. Haglund, if you would agree with that or have a different perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, I mean, I'll give you 3 short stories. We started the training program, we brought the equipment. They need to have modern day equipment, to, do neurosurgery. I mean, we went there, they were using ether in some of the ORs still. They had a Hudson brace and bit, a giggly saw, and a piece of gauze as a bipolar to stop the bleeding on the brain. And we updated them in 1 weekend to modern day equipment. So then the problem is the sustainability, which is a great question. And that's been a difficult thing. If we wait for the government to act, we still wouldn't have done anything over there. But now we've built this, we have 3 neurosurgery centers that are doing operations with the equipment we brought. We're constantly, bringing over equipment, every time we go, maybe 4 to 8 tons of equipment. And they send us a list of what they need, and we do our best to try to find all that stuff. Now, it's the people and the technology and then the training. So my short version of this is, usually when I go over, we have usually a couple neurosurgeons, but I usually do a couple small brain tumors on Monday, a couple bigger ones on Tuesday, and then the man-eating one that's 10 by 12 by 13 centimeters that I really wish would have been embolized, that I have to do, some giant meningioma on Wednesday. Well, Tuesday night I was dead tired. I was laying on a bench in the area where we ate our food, and the residents come in from Uganda. Prof, you okay? And I go, no, I can't do that big tumor tomorrow. I am too tired. And they said, you don't have to worry about it. I go, what do you mean I don't have to worry about it? I thought in my head, did the patient die? They said, no. Joe Kiribawiri, one of the Ugandan neurosurgeons, brought it down without you knowing, because he said if he brought it down and he told you, you'd be poking your nose in there, giving him advice, and he wanted to see if he could do it completely on his own. And I go, well, how'd it go? Well, the patient's up in the ICU doing pretty well. And I go, well, that's awesome. We've trained him. And then this year, we couldn't go because of the pandemic. We sent over about 6 tons of equipment and supplies for them. And I get a call and an email in November from the head of neurosurgery over there, Mike Mahums, and he goes, well, Prof, we just did a neurosurgery camp. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? We didn't go. Who went over there and used all our equipment? I was kind of hurt and trying to figure out, what was going on. I sent an email, well, what did you guys actually do? And he goes, well, we did it ourselves. We did 78 brain tumors in 2 weeks. We ran 5 ORs for 2 weeks straight. 57 have already gone home. And I was like, oh my gosh, we've taught them how to fish. They're reaching critical mass, because now instead of having 5 attendings or 4 attendings, they have 12 attendings and they have 12 residents. So the 24 of them were able to pull off this huge camp on their own with just the supplies we sent. And we didn't do a thing. They didn't even tell us about it. And then kind of my proudest moment that says there's hope for the future, the next week we were interviewing the next class of Ugandan residents for the neurosurgery program. And they zoomed around, this 6 of us were interviewing. I was one. Dr. Mahums, the head of neurosurgery, and Joe Kiribawiri, who's been there from the beginning. But then they scanned around the rest of the room, and Oscar Obiga, our first graduate, Juliet, the one who did the pediatric neurosurgery fellowship in Toronto, and Lydia, the recent graduate who got the top score, were the 5 people interviewing. And it tells me, we can potentially get there. It didn't feel that way for the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It was usually 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 3 steps forward and almost 4 steps back. But, persisting in one place. My whole theme is that if every institution picked a country in Africa, there's only 54, and some of them don't need our help. If they picked a country or one of the major centers in the country, and they made a sustained, long partnership where they work together to sustain the equipment and the training. I do sessions every other week with the residents over there for 2 hours on a Friday morning, and we go through cases and they teach me, and it needs that sustainability, and it needs people that are, the Angela Duckworth grit thing, right? The grit is passion and perseverance. And I think a lot of people have the passion. The question is, can you persevere? And that's where you get the rewards out the other end.
Thank you so much, all. So next question is for all of our panels. So it seems like there's a lot of interest from residents and med students in getting involved in global neurosurgery. So what changes at the training program level do we need to respond to the interest in global neurosurgery?
Well, I can talk a little bit about some of the kind of logistics, because the logistics here are challenging. One of them is funding. And so most institutions are not, you're not paid as a resident for your department, you're paid by your institution. And most institutions aren't going to pay your salary while you're working somewhere other than that institution for very long. So for example, Vanderbilt will pay for a month elective rotation anywhere that a program director sends someone, but that's it, a month. So if you want to go for longer, you've got to find a way to fund that, and funding that purely out of departments is challenging. And then there's other issues related to your competency and working within your competency. And, this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about, especially when I'm sending residents away without one of our faculty members. So I'm responsible for their training, and I have core faculty members who I've authorized to teach these people and to operate with them. And I know that they know what they're doing and they're doing a good job of that. When someone leaves that umbrella and they're off on their own someplace working with faculty that I don't know, or in an environment that may be less supervised, they're on their own. And you can imagine scenarios where somebody is placed in a position to do an operation that they're not prepared to do and has a bad outcome. And how do they manage that? So there's a lot of logistical challenges. Neurosurgery is a small field. Our departments are not big. When you're at Vanderbilt's pretty big, we have 17 or 18 full-time clinical neurosurgeons. That's not that many of us. And so we can't rely on only us to teach our residents when they have these really sustained interests in global neurosurgery, but we have to be really thoughtful about setting them up for success, making sure that they're staying within the bounds of what they really can do safely at that point in their training, and not leaving them in a position where they can have a bad situation develop that we can't control.
Yeah, I think that the funding thing's hard. Duke has some innovative stuff they've done. The Duke Global Health Institute, for instance, Prince Otway, he will pay part of his salary next year, which we would have anyway for the research, but the Duke Global Health Institute is, giving him a partial scholarship, so we didn't need that much more funding for him, but we'll have to pay to fly him over there. When we take residents over for our camps, they have the option of staying the week with us, and if they want to, unlike the military where it's no man or woman left behind, we actually do leave them behind, but they've been there for a week with us and gotten the hang of how things work. But it's a little bit, it's challenging. You don't really want to leave them there, but we have colleagues there that we've worked with for now 15 years, so we can trust them to supervise them appropriately. But Lola's point's really well taken. It's sending a junior resident over to some place you've never been, you don't know the situation, but you've got a letter and a excited resident is probably a recipe for potential disaster, which you don't want. You want it to be a positive experience. And so we do a lot to make sure it's a positive experience when they go. So I think that's a really good point.
I think the other thing that, we've got to be aware of is that we're, I think everyone on this panel certainly understands this. We're not sending people off to go get more training they wouldn't get in the United States because they're going to a place where they can do more, right? Or they, will have a level of supervision that's maybe less. We really have to send people who have a skill set that they're working well within. We're not going to train our people abroad. We're going to bring a service over there. So, every resident's a little different in that ability. Some residents have a really good sense of their abilities and some have less so. And some people reach different technical abilities at different points. And so when I'm thinking about who's going on these trips with the faculty who are taking them, we're having a really frank discussion about where that resident is in their own personal development and what they're ready for.
For the interest of time, I'm actually gonna have Amar ask his question.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. So my question, before I begin my question, I want to talk about the realities, the contrasting realities that exist in global North and global South. Where global North, people from global North think that they're doing something that is helping the people in global South, but people in global South feel like they deserve this because they have contributed to the wealth and the power that many of these countries in global North have attained, right? So my question is that, is global neurosurgery just a concentration in the US, or is it a global movement? And if it's a global movement, are you as program directors willing to fight for the inclusion of people from around the world meaningfully in all levels of your program to make sure that global neurosurgery doesn't just remain to the US, or isn't just about or centered around the US, but it's about and around the needs of the very people. And so that is my question. It's very broad, but I want to hear from all of you. How do you think you are willing to struggle or fight for people all around the world? Thank you.
Well, I mean, I guess I'll try to answer that question. Not an easy one, but it's a good question. The logistics of foreign medical graduates training in our country is not easy, but there are many that do, that have come from, you know, foreign countries and have gotten into our program and things like that. So I think that that is a possibility, but it has to be done, you know, kind of inside the match, because the amount of funding, the cost to having a resident in the program, you know, yes, CMS, the Medicare, Medicaid funds some of their clinical training, but usually it doesn't cover all of it. And it definitely doesn't cover several of the years where they're doing research, which the department has to fund, which makes that a very expensive proposition. But we've had, you know, residents from, you know, we have a resident in our program right now from Sudan. She's amazing. She came over and did her master's in global science with us at Duke, and then applied to neurosurgery, and she's just wonderful. Lola, I think, knows her, you know, Gigi is doing great.
Yeah, we tried to get her. She's wanted to stay at Duke. I don't know.
I don't know what she was thinking, thankfully. But I mean, it's hard to train. I mean, we just don't have slots. I mean, now fellowships is a different story. We do have fellows that come over sometimes from, you know, other countries. But the training of a resident or just dropping in is so legally difficult, and risk adverse people and stuff like that make it tough with the health system being very risk adverse. So I understand your point, but it's hard. I mean, you know, at the same time, I mean, there's people, the NED group that, you know, opened up the hospital with Paul Young from St. Louis and Jose Piquer from Spain. I mean, opened up the hospital in Zanzibar. I mean, that's a European, US led. There's some amazing surgeons from Norway that come down to Africa and do surgery there. So there's opportunities to train with them, but you're right, it's difficult to have them come to the US and train. I don't know what anybody else thinks. I don't have a great answer, but I know the logistical problems of it, and it's hard. You have to overcome those.
You know, the one area, and I don't know if Brian's still on the call or not, where I'm aware of some work in the space is through the CNS Foundation, which is, you know, making a major effort to offer visiting observerships for international neurosurgeons who are already in practice, you know, or getting into practice, finishing their international training, to come and spend substantial amounts of time, you know, with US sites, you know, 6 months, for example. Where, you know, and in many cases, these have to be observerships because of these legal issues, the medical legal issues that go around them. But they're, you know, as a fully trained neurosurgeon, there's a lot you can learn from embedding yourself in another program for a period of time, and also a lot of networking opportunities and ability, opportunities to continue to grow and learn beyond that. So I know that there are some of our national organizations that are making some strides in that area. But I agree, it's certainly not enough to solve the global problem.
Yeah, thanks, Lola. I just want to echo what Lola said. I think there's a lot of really great opportunity, but at least it's at the level of the observership for now, unless there's a fellowship. The residency slots are obviously very, very difficult just because of the numbers. But Lola and I are proud to be part of the CNS, the Congress of Neurologic Surgeons, and through their foundation, we've started this first year along with Key Park and John Mayer and the folks at Harvard PGSCC to do an observership both at Mass General as well as a lot of the amazing policy work and educational constructs through Harvard. But that, as Lola mentioned, is an observership, and that's probably an amazing opportunity, but it is limited in the sense that it's not a residency slot or a fellowship slot, where I think that's where the question was going. It's a great question. It's a tough answer though. But I think I wouldn't give up. I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think change happens in a vacuum. I think Dr. Haglund, Dr. Chambliss, Dr. Naheed all are mentioning the complexities of the questions you ask. And I think everyone on this call, including Dr. Park, you're talking to people who are allies, are people who are encouraging you and who want to help you make change. Because that's ultimately, like Dr. Haglund was saying, what is the mission and what is the purpose of neurosurgery and what is the purpose of global neurosurgery? And that's to help our fellow brothers and sisters, not just in the United States, but all over. And that change, I think sometimes I see your chats about the AANS and the NIH and NREF. That change is slow and probably not as fast as you want it, and probably takes time. But I think you have a few faculty on this call who would like to see change and who think it can get better and who think that we can broaden our horizons and broaden our umbrella to help more men and women. Oh, and children. I just don't do pediatrics. Not much, at least.
So to be respectful of everyone's time, I think we're actually going to close the session now. I'll have Dr. Park give some closing remarks.
I can do that. Well, first, before I do that, Grant, do you want to just quickly make a comment? I mean, I think the medical student voice is really important here, and Grant and his friends have done some amazing things. So I want to cede a little bit of time for Grant. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Hey, Dr. Park, thanks so much. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Grant. It's nice to meet you all. Thanks so much, doctors, for coming and speaking to us. It's really been a treat to hear you all. I'm a first-year medical student here at Harvard, and just got to work with Dr. Park on a global neurosurgery hackathon. And we actually had some faculty from several of your universities. Dr. Dewan was part of it, I know, and a couple others who came and kind of served in different mentorship roles. But this has been such a lovely treat, and it's been so insightful to hear about differences in your programs and kind of goals and things going forward. So thank you so much. Thanks, Dr. Park.
Yeah, and I'll start with what I saw Grant and his friends do. They've actually went to the dean's office at Harvard Medical School, and they are demanding a global neurosurgery track as part of their curriculum. And it's looking like they're going to get it too. So it's just like, so the students can actually drive some of these educational curricula. And then of course we have 4 amazing, people that if anyone goes to these people, you're going to get the backing, right? And full support if you're interested in global neurosurgery. But we have a selection bias here. And we want you all here to start creating a culture change within the US training programs where global neurosurgery training is becomes sort of included, right? It's an integral part of every neurosurgical residency program, and that's going to take some effort. But we've made a lot of progress within neurosurgery training programs here in the U.S. You are some amazing people that are supporting that. It's driven mainly by students and future residents and residents. So I mean, this is maybe we'll have another one of these panels in about 3-4 years and then see how far we've come. But I think we're on a really good path. So thank you everybody for joining today. Isaac, Michael, Lola, Brian, and all the students, both here in the US and overseas. And thank you, Eddie and Hodan, for a great job moderating.
Yeah, this was a great session. Thanks, Key, and thanks to the students. And you did a wonderful job. Honored to be a part of it.
Dr. Haglund has a very, very nice car. I can tell you that. It's not a Ferrari though.
No.
Isaac and I are in the wrong business, the tumors, clearly.
Skull-based tumors, nonetheless.
Exactly. Thank you.